Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 211 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is LGBT plus intimate partner violence. And it is Friday, the 9th of June 2023, as I record this. So, if you've been a long time listener of the podcast or a long time reader of the blog posts, then you absolutely know that I can never say on a positive topic for too long, because I really do like the darker side of stuff, which it does include like mental health, abuse, stuff like that, and basically anything that forensic psychology covers, because I think it's really interesting. And LGBT plus topics is absolutely no different because there is a darker side, not necessarily from homophobia, but even though homophobia basically underlines everything when it comes to this topic. So this is such an interesting podcast episode. This is definitely something we need to talk about because, as I outline in today's episode, this is a major problem, but no one talks about it because of tons of other biases that actually happen during this. So it's really interesting. I learned a lot, and this is definitely one of the best podcast episodes I've done for quite a while because it's so fascinating to me personally, and I know you're going to enjoy it too. And as always, you can always share your thoughts and feelings on today's episode by emailing me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Whiteley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post at Connor Whiteley, psychology author. I really do love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology. So I know whenever I do a normal sponsored product for today's episode, it actually links in to the topic really well. But this one, to be honest, I'm really recommending it because I've not recommended or actually used the book as a sponsored product for ages. But social psychology is so important when it actually comes to this topic. Not only because this actually focuses on relationships, hatred, in that group dynamics in groups and out groups, because of course that drives a lot of conflict up between different people. But I also wanted to talk about this though, because whenever crime and abuse happens, this is an intrinsically social process though, because this happens between people. Someone is actually doing something to someone else. So this great, really easy to understand book gives you a great overview of social psychology with a lot of breadth and depth. For example, it does look at the inner group processes like we spoke about, but it also talks about the psychology of persuasion, how what culture impacts our behavior, self-esteem, and so many more brilliant social psychology topics. I love this book. It's a lot of fun. It's really fascinating. And I think the nice thing about social psychology is that you can actually relate it to everyday life. So I really do recommend this. A great, really easy to understand book. So that's Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And you can also buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Con Whiteley. So, whilst the buying book helps to support the creation of the podcast and the editing, my time in creating the show, which does take about 4 hours a week, is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. So, as always, I thank you to my wonderful patrons because your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. And if you wanted to become a patron of the show and to get lots of early access, behind the scenes stuff, and plenty more other benefits, then you can also become a patron at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what is LGBT plus intimate partner violence. So this covers stuff like domestic abuse and other rather dark topics though. And I definitely think that today's podcast episode is so important, like for both gay people and straight people though, because it's really important to actually raise awareness. Say that whoever you are, this is not okay, and this is flat out wrong. And also to help inspire victims to actually go and seek help though, and also to make sure that people who actually work in these mental health services and these survivor services actually know the difficulties that different groups can actually face when coming at you. So really important, really interesting. So let's dive into it. Why do clinical psychology students and psychologists need to be aware of LGBT plus domestic violence? I've mentioned before on the podcast about domestic violence and the terrible impact this has on the victims, as well as there have been a lot of terrible stories about homosexual women have been domestically abused and they get up the courage to leave and they go to a shelter, and the staff there make heterosexist comments to the woman, asking her about her boyfriend. However, with this people is that if the victim is a lesbian, then this question always leads them to shutting down, no longer talking, and they don't often get the help that they need, since these women were in abusive relationships with their girlfriends. Therefore, not only are these women having to develop the courage to flee, ask for help, and the shame that comes from being in an abusive relationship, but they come into services and they're asked heterosexist questions that only add to their shame. These stories all relate why a gay-related intimate partner violence is one of the largest health problems facing the gay community, with some research showing that intimate partner violence happens in 1 in 3 people, and that is just outrageously high. The problem with this intimate partner violence mainly comes from the shame and stigma being compounded, because you have the shame of the intimate partner violence and the anti-gay bias, so that comes from the abusers, like internalized transphobia or homophobia, both resulting in gay intimate partner violence not getting the attention it so desperately deserves. As well as because intimate partner violence is the most common in heterosexual relationships, many gay people might not even realise they're experiencing it. Additionally, as many similarities as there are between both homosexual and heterosexual intimate partner violence, the gay violence tended to take place behind the backdrop of anti-gay bias. As a result of this bias, making many gay people, for the most part unconsciously, feel whether they deserve the abuse as a punishment for their homosexuality or gender identity. And these charts of internalized homophobia continue to harm their lives and relationships. Overall, when it comes to clinical psychologists and psychology students not knowing about gay intimate partner violence, this is mainly because it isn't spoken about. It isn't taken seriously, and I think this paragraph from Dr. Suzanne Holt sums up why we need to know about this perfectly. Open quote. LGBT plus domestic violence is not the same as domestic violence in the heterosexual community. There are significant differences. If you don't understand those differences, then you aren't going to be helpful or even safe as a service provider for those who need it. Close quote. On the whole, if you don't know about something, then you can't help and support the person. For example, if you didn't know about depression, anxiety, and autism, how on earth could you ever hope to support these people that need our help? You couldn't. So this is no different. What do mental health professionals need to know about LGBT plus intimate partner violence? So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the three main causes of this form of abuse: heterosexism and the barriers to seeking help. Interestingly enough, there is such a thing called heterosexism, and this is the belief that being a heterosexual and cisgender is the only way that has the right to exist, and it is the natural sexual orientation and gender identity. Personally, there's a reason why I just laughed, because homosexuality is found in over 1,500 species of animals on Earth. Yet homophobia is only found in humans. So what's actually natural? Anyway, heterosexism in forms of public and legal definitions of domestic abuse. So these have knock-on effects on the laws and intake questions that professionals ask, as well as the perceptions that professionals and lay people have about both victims and abusers. Since at its very core, heterosexism is about erasing gay relationships. That doesn't help people to realise that gay people can be domestically abused too, and they deserve the exact same help given to straight people. Internalised homophobia. I think this is definitely one of the most heartbreaking things about the gay community at times, since we take all of the words hate, outrage, and disgust for who we love, and we allow that shame to take root inside of us, resulting in gay people unconsciously seeking out punishment or to project our shame onto another person. This internalized homophobia takes many forms, but sadly, one of those forms is definitely intimate partner violence, as well as this helps to explain why some victims stay with abusers and why some abusers take out their shame on others. It is still disgusting, but I don't think we can blame the gay community for the development of internalized homophobia. They can definitely be blamed if they don't take steps to get rid of their shame, and if they use that shame to harm others, then the blame is arise. But considering it is the biggest and the other idiots that causes this shame to develop, I don't blame my community at all. And because believe me, I really do understand what some people have to live through when trying to figure out that they're gay. And I understand where this internalized homophobia comes from. Believe me, I do. But it isn't right at all. It really is not. Anti-LGBT plus bias. This awful type of a bias that creates a societal stigma towards gay people, and in terms of intimate partner violence, this results in the USA not having a single LGBT plus abuse shelter. This is made even worse by there only being 2 court-approved gay-specific batterer intervention programs in the entirety of the USA. In comparison to over 150 court-approved programs in LA County alone. This is problematic because not having these shelters for gay people means that they have to seek a shelter with heterosexual people and they get exposed to heterosexism in the process, which, when you're being abused, is not what you want in the slightest. Also, if a transgender person tries to get shelter from a violent abuse situation, they often get turned away by heterosexual shelters, so they end up going back to their abusers and getting it 10 times harder than before for daring to run away. What categories of people result in LGBT plus domestic abuse? To be honest, I'm not sure that subtitle is right, but it's the best I could come up with. As a clinical psychologist and a psychology student, it is our job to be aware of the prevention strategies that can be used to help gay people out of abusive relationships. Therefore, Dr. Hoyt did some groundbreaking work, and we now understand the 4 categories involved in abuse and how they relate to gay people. Firstly, there is the primary aggressor. This is someone who has the goal to maintain their control and power, so they mentally, emotionally, sexually, physically, or financially abuse others. Secondly, there is the secondary aggressor, and this is a common category for gay relationships, since it is often seen as a mutual conflict. But the secondary aggressor is a person who fights back in retaliation or self-defense. Yet what makes this person an aggressor is that they don't disengage once the conflict has ended temporarily. Thirdly, you have the primary victim, and this is the person who seeks to disengage from any conflict as quickly as possible, so there is no fighting back in defense or retaliation. Finally, there is the defending victim. This is another common category for gay relationships, because I want to be the first to admit that members of the gay community, we all need to defend ourselves. There is a good chance that we will be beaten up on the streets and attacked. To be honest, if you go to certain corners of the internet, then you can find people's egg-like experiences of that. And this can happen at a school, at home, or on the playground as well. Therefore, when a conflict begins, a defending victim will fight back in self-defense. It's once a person feels like they've won in defending themselves or have established a sense of safety, they stop and disengage from the conflict. On the whole, according to Dr. Hode, the 2 most common categories that mental health services will see are defending victims and secondary aggressors, since primary aggressors really don't seek out mental health services, despite them needing it just as much as the other categories, if not more. However, it's important to know that individual therapy isn't useful for abusers, as well as obviously couples therapy is an extremely bad idea for victims and partners. Ford and all, 2012. Overall, when it comes to best mental health intervention that we can use to address gay intimate partner violence, we simply don't know. We don't know because there isn't enough research yet, and this will continue to be one of the largest health problems the gay community faces for the foreseeable future. Yet until then, the best prevention strategy we have is to simply heal its cause, and all roads of violence leads back to homophobia, and that shame that gay people were forced to feel by their haters, bigots, and plenty of other knobs, so that I really hope that people never get to meet. It is awful, I don't wish it on anyone. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I think intimate partner violence, it is a very dark topic, but it is something we need to talk about because we aren't going to solve these problems. We aren't going to help people, whatever your sexuality is, if we don't talk about it. So it's that positivity and it's that sort of sense of hope that I want to leave you with like today. But I promise though that for the next 2 Thursdays, we've actually got a lot of positive stuff like coming on because next Thursday we're talking about the second adolescence for gay people, and that is such an exciting idea which I absolutely love, and I honestly can't wait for that to happen. So we've actually got that topic, and then in the final week I've got an extra special topic which I'm going to have so much fun with. I'm going to have so much fun with because it's something It's basically everything that I've heard, and it's going to be a lot of fun because we're dealing with some really quite deadly myths. That really drives homophobia. And a lot of stuff that's happening in the US is actually happening because of these two myths. So, really interesting, really fascinating, and I'm really am enjoying this. So, if you know anyone who would find today's episode useful, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you wanted to learn more, definitely check out Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology, available in all the usual places. And if you wanted to become a patron of the show, then definitely check out patreon.com/Con Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.